Hello and welcome to another wonderful edition of the Movies and Tea After Hours. Tonight we have an addition to our Guillermo del Toro season as we check out his first season on Netflix of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. I'm your host always, Elwood Jones, and joining me of course is my co-host Miss Kim Lowe.
Hello.
So obviously if you listen to our second season, all those many moons ago, you know that we are obviously big fans of Del Toro, so there was much excitement when we found out that Del Toro was going to be bringing his love of horror to Netflix for a 8-episode horror anthology, following in the giving us a show which is very much in the vein of the likes of Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, and certainly can also be compared to many of the great horror anthology series such as like Tales from the Crypt or Masters of Horror, Tales from the Dark Side, and Del Toro here not only handpicking the directors but also the stories, including 2 he wrote himself, and bringing together a selection of very interesting filmmakers, many of which have had impact on various degrees on the independent horror scene. Some are people that have worked with Del Toro. And tonight we're obviously going to go through the initial 8-episode run of this series and let you know our thoughts in what's no doubt going to be a very spoiler-heavy episode, so you can see yourself pre-warned. But Kim, are you a fan of the horror anthology format?
Yeah, I am. I believe we've talked a few times about horror anthologies, and I'm in general pretty into it. I think I've watched a good portion of it, barring maybe 1 or 2. So I was really excited to see what this one had to offer. Considering, we have David Fincher who does his, Love, Death, and Robots that we personally really like also,
Yep.
and that's also, anthology format in that sort of style as well. And, Love, Death, and Robots in comparison to this one is a lot easier to go through than this one. This one is much longer short films in their stories. And, they're quite lengthy. I mean, some of them is better than others, I guess. Like, none of them I think here is very disappointing, but in general they all have something to be, something to appreciate in every one of them. But obviously we all have our, obviously off where we've discussed some of the ones that we've liked and disliked.
Definitely so. I think when this series came up, reminded me on Netflix that it was coming up, there was obviously that hope that it would be something to fill the time before we got another season of Love, Death, and Robots. And when I got a couple of episodes deep into this, and I was like, oh no, this is not like Love, Death, and Robots at all. This is a very different beast entirely. And second, I'm making Kim watch this as well, and felt kind of bad about that as well. So.
Well, I mean, there's nothing to feel bad about. I mean, Guillermo del Toro, kind of like the style that he has, and kind of like because of the season we did, we're now, paying a lot more special attention to what he has coming out, and honestly, also the directors that he's interested in, especially like, when we talked about Don't Be Afraid of Tigers, and that one is, that's also by a director that he appreciates, which I was surprised didn't have a segment in this, because from like how much he seemed to like really love that film itself, and you would have thought that he maybe would have given her something to do here.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Toad's Not Afraid. I mean, that's still a movie that I think about even now. And to think that it's on Shudder is even more sort of mind-blowing, really, the fact that they were the ones who sort of picked it up. But no, Issa Lopez, I know that he's working with her on her next film, which I believe is about werewolf cowboys, which I'm very excited to see. But no, you're right, it is very sort of surprising that she didn't have something in this at all.
Yeah, but I mean, barring that, that she's not in there, and that's kind of a little bit shocking to me. But there's a lot of, like, when you look through all of the directors here, they all are very, there's things that we've definitely seen of theirs. from, producers that worked with him, or is it a producer? I can't remember. And then there was also like people, other directors who have had other very successful films in particularly the indie scene.
Yeah.
And you even look at kind of like a lot of the actors, while some of them are more in supporting roles in other films and TV series or something like that, they still are fairly, there's a good cast of, there's a good cast that goes with each of these stories.
Yeah, definitely. So should we get into the stories? First off, we had Lot 36. This is directed by Guillermo Navarro. Navarro is a Academy Award-winning cinematographer and is best obviously known for his work with Del Toro, as well as directing episodes of Hannibal and Luke Cage. He won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography for Pan's Labyrinth, and has since gone on to work on films such as like Hellboy, Zenfura, Space Adventure, Night at the Museum, and Pacific Rim. So it kind of makes sense, obviously, that he's included here, obviously having worked with Del Toro so closely over the course of his career. And certainly when it came to Lot 36, this was a story based on a short story by Del Toro himself, in which a xenophobic right-wing veteran called Nick, here played by Tim Blake Nelson, the first of many really interesting actors who turn up over the course of this series. And in this episode we also have Sebastian Roche as well, which is very exciting if you're a fan of Fringe especially. He's a veteran, he's down on his luck, he's deaf in one ear, his wife has left him, and he's very sort of generally angry at the world. And at the same time he's purchased the right to an abandoned storage room, which the daughter of the previous owner initially pleads with him to let her gather some belongings from there, and he basically shuts her down. And over the course of clearing this locker, he finds that this locker contains a number of strange items, including some volumes of demon summoning, a German seance table, and it's through trying to sell these items that he meets this buyer called Roland, here played by Sebastian Roche, who says that he'll offer him like 300,000 if he can find this missing volume. So the pair go back to the locker only to uncover the true secrets that have been hidden by its former owner. This one is obviously, I think, when you get to the big twist here, you can see that Del Toro's fingerprints really clearly over this, because there's a real Lovecraftian influence when it came to his monster of the week that he includes in the finale here. And certainly I think every time that you see something which is like a mass of tentacles or demonic summoning, then Lovecraft is normally an influence somewhere behind it, because that's kind of his bag. And certainly there are some adaptations of Lovecraft stories here, but I don't know about yourself, Kim, but I really like old Satanists, so this episode was really up my street.
I think that in terms of the Satanist angle, it is very good, because that's the angle that I really do like. But Lot 36 is the kicking off episode, and I think it's a really good way to kick off this whole cabinet of curiosities. Mostly because it's the most kind of light on whatever they're doing type of thing. It's a decent sized story, running the shortest in the whole, all the 8 episodes. It's 45 minutes, and it's, it's pretty fast paced in the sense that things move, like the pieces fall together pretty quickly as he's, going through everything. And there's, certain little angles to it which come in, and obviously when you get to the big finale, it really works. The only thing is that I don't know, maybe it's because of all the F-bombs that I didn't like, or I don't really like movies with a lot of F-bombs. Like, I find it very unnecessary.
Yeah.
And but then at the same time, I feel like there's like this really kind of like reverse psychology here, where he's bringing this person who's very like make America great again.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of racist, and he's kind of very just he has this like very right side type of, is it right side?
He's...
type of point of view in everything, and it kind of, I guess it makes a character a bit more exaggerated on that. Like, it's very intense as a character that you're watching because he's just so angry all the time. So when you're doing this, it's kind of like the whole cynical personality kind of eventually seeps away when things turn bad. And it kind of comes to bite him in the ass.
Yeah, it's fun as well, the fact that we get another throwback to the Pale Man sequence in Pan's Labyrinth. As he's obviously told not to do something, so of course, what does he instantly go and do? It's sort of like with the Pale Man chamber, it's like, don't touch anything. So of course she goes and steals the grape. In this one, it's like, don't break the protective seal. So what does he do? It's sort of like, it's like, great. Yeah, I like the monster here because it's, as I say, it's basically basically a mass of swirling tentacles. It's like within a human frame. So I think the actual design work in this episode is really fantastic. So the fact that it's Del Toro's cinematographer is directing, it doesn't sort of stray too far from like the Del Toro world, and I think in many ways it's kind of set up a little bit of a false expectation for where the rest of the series would go, because with this one it felt like something that could belong in like Love, Death and Robots or Masters of Horror. It just felt like a very sort of modern horror story with some very old school sort of twists in there, and I just kept chasing that dragon to try hoping that something would replicate what this episode gave me. And I think that the next episode, Graveyard Rats, comes close, but certainly with this one it sort of like felt that it was almost like part of a different show compared to everything else that we see of this series, and certainly we see some things.
Yeah, I mean, Lot 36 is, I think that when you talk about it, I think that the best part of this is the cinematography. If there was anything, obviously coming from a director who's an award-winning cinematographer, there's something like, there are some really elements that I really like, and one obviously is the creature they're talking about, like the tently type of creature that they have, and at the same time I also like how they play. It's one of my favorite things to talk about when we talk about horror films is how people use darkness to their advantage. I know I talked about it before when we were talking about, our top 10 scariest moments, top 5 scariest moments. And then I talked about Lights Out and the unique way. And here I really like it also because this storage lot is lit by this timer lighting. And it's kind of like, oh, when is the light going to turn off type of thing, right? You have this like kind of ticking in the background of the light going, and then oh, you have to turn it back on, and then you have to wait for the next moment. And I think that plays so well in the darkness, like when you turn on the lights every single time, what's going to be right next to you, right? What lurks in the darkness. And I mean, that's like my final thought on Lot 36. I think that you are right. I do agree this is completely different, and it kind of sets up a different set of expectations, but this definitely isn't my favorite in this one, but I mean, I guess I'm not like, I don't have the same love of this as you do. So
next up we had Graveyard Rats. This was directed by Vincenzo Natali, who is probably best known for directing Cube as well as Splice. He's one of those directors that I always felt never got the sort of praise that I felt and recognition that I felt he deserved, especially because Cube is fantastic and Splice is also fantastic. He has recently, in 2019, he did In the Tall Grass.
Well, I mean, the only one I watched of his is Haunter, which I thought was pretty decent, but I know that people didn't really like it.
What do they know? This one is based on a short story by Henry Kuttner. Again, another Lovecraftian link, because Kuttner is a horror writer who he was friends with Lovecraft, and he actually contributed quite a lot to the Cthulhu mythos, submitted stories which outlines many of the lesser of the great gods. So amongst his sort of contributions, you had things such as like Vordaros, the Hydra, Nogoth, and his sort of, I think, responsible in many ways for adding a fair bit to that Cthulhu mythos, which whenever you talk about, obviously, Lovecraft, I mean, Cthulhu is always sort of like front and center, and I think he was very sort of key in playing that. And again, it's unsurprising that Del Toro would choose one of his stories to be included in this set. But Graveyard Rats is a period piece, which is a warning sign for myself straight away, because I'm not a huge fan of period pieces, nor Gothic. So, this one, though, is actually pretty good, as it features David Hewitt as Masson, who is not only the guy who looks after the graveyard, but he also has a sideline in grave robbing, which he uses to pay off his gambling debts. And unfortunately, he's hit a bit of a bad streak with his gambling debts, with the local gangsters that he owes money to threatening to bury him alive. At the same time, he's having trouble getting hold of possessions because, as he claims, the graveyard rats are stealing them. And upon coming across a recently buried aristocrat, he formulates a plan to get the gold teeth are in the mouth of this aristocrat before the graveyard rats do. However, when he opens it up, he finds that the rats have already made off with the body, and hence leading him into a journey of labyrinth tunnels and horrible beasties that lie beneath the graveyard. Kim, when it comes to period horror, are you a fan? I know you're obviously a fan of like Austen and Bronte and stuff, so does that extend to horror?
I don't know. I don't seem to have like a, specific frame of like when things are set that bothers me. It's more like how the story comes through, right?
Yeah. That
makes more sense to me. And for Graveyard Rats, I don't really think it mattered what era it was set in. I do like, the more gothic type of style sometimes. I do appreciate a lot of that sort of it's like when Del Toro did what's his face there, the one with the big haunted house.
Crimson Peak.
Yeah, the Crimson Peak. Like, I appreciated the first time. It was just when I watched it again that, there was a little bit of a different opinion in it. I mean, whoever's interested can head over and listen to our episode. For Graveyard Rats, I think what really shone was really the whole claustrophobic atmosphere they had of going through all the tunnels and like, oh, when was it going to cave in? Like, what branch was he going to pull that rocks were going to come down? Or, like, oh, where are the rats coming from? Because, like, you have these little squeaky sounds and you're like, ugh, it just kind of is like this like spine tingling type of moment. Like, oh, I don't really like this, the feeling.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And I mean, but Graveyard Rats was really good because, at the end we obviously had a really nice twist when he falls down this like big hole that sinks into the ground, and then he gets into this area and then he realizes there's actually not only, that one threat that's there, but there's also other threats that's here.
Yeah, I think this is... I mean, I kind of would have been happy if we just left it with giant rats. I didn't think we needed to add a dark chapel underneath the graveyard, and we didn't need to have zombie skeletons underneath the graveyard as well. So it's weird as well. It's also, but this is the shortest episode in the set. I think this is about 35 minutes long, and yet it still manages to cram a great deal of things into it. David Hewitt is absolutely outstanding as Masson. I think he was really fantastic here, and just to see the desperation of someone willing to crawl through rat infested tunnels to go and find the heirlooms that he wants, that are going to pay off his gambling debts, I think was really fantastic. And at the end, it has a really great payoff as well.
Yes. That ending, man. Woo!
It brings back memories of The Vanishing in many ways, and then just adds on to it in a whole other level. So I thought the payoff at the end was really fantastic. I thought that was really great, and I'm trying to remember. We obviously have like passages of like when he's climbing up the tunnel in there, and he's quoting lines from Paradise Lost, which is obviously Milton. Which again, I'm not going to say is because I'm not going to claim to be my literary skills. I only remember it because it's a line from Seven.
Okay.
So that's the only reason I was like that's the only reason I knew the line he's quoting, because it's a line used by John Doe in Seven. So
Ah, okay. Okay.
But come.
Yeah, but I mean, like for Graveyard Rats, it's interesting because I recently had watched a short at the Toronto After Dark, like covered for Toronto After Dark, and it was and I was thinking in my mind, oh, what a great pairing this would make, and that was there's this short called The Rat Catcher's Daughter, which would be such a fantastic addition to this. That one's like an animated horror, but it also uses rats in such a clever way. And that was, that's my little thought that I had when I was watching this. I think Graveyard Rats is like very straightforward. I think while I really appreciated the moving skeletons and stuff, dark chapel at the bottom.
Yeah.
You are right that it didn't need to be there. I think the rats were sufficiently scary enough. But I didn't hate that, I didn't hate that addition too much. And it's actually, and to be fair, I think that Graveyard Rats has one of the better endings, like one of the best endings probably in all of the shorts that are coming up, that in this whole cabinet of curiosities.
Yeah, it is a really great ending. It's funny how it just comes full circle. That we open with Masson chasing off a pair of grave robbers, only to find out that he's actually a grave robber himself, and then we encounter these characters at the end of the episode, and it just everything comes full circle. It's just it's a really, really great episode. So this is a recommendation for myself, at least, anyway. So,
Absolutely.
Next up, we have The Autopsy, directed by David Pryor, based on a short story by Michael Shea, featuring a script by David S. Goyer. David Pryor is a director as well as a screenwriter, and he's probably best known for The Empty Man, which if you have Disney Plus is probably one of the few things that you've watched on there.
And well, I mean, he's also credited for 2 of the episodes on the TV series, the Netflix documentary Voir,
which is so funny because we were just talking about that before we came on today as well. So yes, he was the director for Summer of the Shark But I Don't Like Him. Yeah, Voir was great. It was like one of those few decent film documentaries that we've had recently, and then obviously Elvis Mitchell's Am I Black Enough for You, which also just recently hit Netflix as well, being the second as late. So I hope Netflix continues this trend of just making good film documentaries now, because I don't think I need any more video game documentaries or Why We Love Toys or the 80s and stuff. So. But no, The Autopsy is, for myself, just like a real classic, so like Outer Limits style episode, in which an aging sheriff brings in his friend, Dr. Carl Winters, to perform autopsies on civil miners who recently died when one of the guys from town, another miner, turned up with an object that exploded, causing the mine to collapse. At the same time, Dr. Winters has terminal cancer, but agrees to carry out these autopsies as a favour to his friend. Along the way, piecing together the mystery surrounding Joe Allen, as well as what happened to him. This is probably the one that I think when you talk to most people about this series, this is one that has been sort of widely deemed as being one of the most popular episodes of the series, and I can see why, because it's one of the few episodes that doesn't feel that it went on like too long. I mean, a lot of these episodes, they feel that we have an ending and then it rolls on for another 10 minutes, making me wonder, did Netflix have like a requirement for these episodes that they had to all be like an hour rather than the usual sort of 40 to 45 minutes? But certainly it does mean that a lot of the episodes suffer. But when it came to The Autopsy, I think that how it was paced and the structure, and certainly the payoff was just really fantastic for this one. So,
oh yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of like Autopsy of Jane Doe, and I talk about it all the time. And I know you haven't seen it yet, and I feel like
but you gave a big recommendation.
If I keep talking about it, talking up to it, like, because I know a lot of people don't like it as well. So, but this one, like the Autopsy, obviously reminded me a lot of that type of vibe. Like you had that kind of dreading feeling as you're, going through this autopsy after, from all the people, of the miners that got pulled out of the shaft, and he's trying to figure out, what happened. And as he's recording all this, and I think that the cleverest part is really, I think that this one also had a really decent ending. It was such a clever way to end the whole situation, because obviously in the middle you have kind of this possession sort of deal, I guess you would call that.
Yeah.
And through all this, you have this character who's possessing this body that feels like he's, thought everything through. He knows every thought in your mind. He knows everything, right? And then, at the end you realize that, well, no one is invincible, and that is so great. Like, I really love that type of ending.
Yeah, it is a really great ending. I mean, the idea of, as you said, it's just this entity obviously believing it's more intelligent because it's existed for all these millennia, and obviously comes across the Doctor, who finds the one thing that it hasn't counted on. But just throughout, I think I was a little suspect of where the story was going. I mean, obviously it got a little shaky, and there's a couple of moments where I didn't think, but I think by the end it sort of brings it all together well enough for that payoff to work. And I think certainly the autopsy sequences, which are just are really great. I mean, it's stylistically it's shot very well as well. It's got a real sort of nice style to it, and you get this whole sort of like small town, the fact that they don't have a proper autopsy room set up, so they've basically set up a meat packing plant for these autopsies to be carried off, because it's the only room they can make cold enough. And just as he's sort of piecing it together as he's carrying out the autopsy, I think was just it was just really great. So yeah, another recommendation for there definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Next up, we have The Outside by Anna Lily Amirpour, who directed A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, as well as The Bad Batch, two films I was really ecstatic about and really enjoyed. Kim, we obviously talked about A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which I think we both liked.
Yeah, we both like that one. Yeah, I have yet to watch Bad Batch. It keeps getting pushed back in my list. I should really get to it.
It's the problem if it's a Netflix exclusive. It's not going anywhere, so you just tend to like put it aside for like watching other things like Stranger Things or whatever you're binge watching at the minute. So this one's
anything.
No, that's the thing. You got a young child. You can't no Netflix time for you either. This is based on the webcomic by Emily Carroll, and this one stars Kate Micucci, who I'm a huge fan of. It also has Martin Starr in it as well, who, if you're a fan of Freaks and Geeks or Silicon Valley, you'll be well aware of who he is, and he's been building up a nice cult reputation on the indie scene, especially as of late. But here Micucci plays Stacy, who is a bank clerk who is socially awkward. She feels unattractive, and at the same time, all the women she's sort of surrounded with are living this sort of like Valley of the Dolls style existence, where they all talk about who's getting divorced, who's shacking up with who, and living these seemingly perfect lives. And when she's invited to one of her co-workers' Christmas party, she's given a bottle of this lotion called Aloe Glow, which promises to provide the secret to all life's woes, as it will make you incredibly beautiful. However, it basically causes her a rash and leads her down a real rabbit hole where the lines between reality and fantasy become ever so blurred. But Kim, this one plays into TV shopping. Have you actually bought anything off TV shopping? Because I worked for the call center that used to sell all that tat. So
no, I don't. I don't do that sort of thing. And plus, like, I don't actually have TV channels anymore.
Oh no, you're the generation
my
just
main
watches
thing
streaming.
is Netflix. So Netflix and Shudder, right? So it's really come to the point where for me it doesn't have that same appeal. And it's not like I stay up late enough to look at like these shopping channels and whatever channels go on. And I always feel like if I pay that stuff, they're probably not going to send it to me. I feel like I'm going to get conned. So
it is always in the back of your mind. It's sort of like, why is it not available in shops? It's but yeah, as the person who used to take all the orders of that stuff, I can guarantee that if it wasn't a music collection, it was tap.
Yeah, I mean, the outside is very weird. Like it's a very, very odd type of series, but it kind of matches the character that they're portraying here. And I mean, Stacy is an odd duck, and I say that in the most literal way, literal, and like, I don't know, because she's into, like, taxidermy is her hobby. Yeah. And she has these like, and like, but it's such a nice series because it focuses on the extremities you would go to and the pressures of kind of like the work environment, the society that you're in for, her to look a certain way or be a certain way. And it starts kind of weighing down on her a lot as it becomes apparent, like, she really, really wants to fit in. I think a lot of people go through that in their lives, and like, obviously this is a super extreme situation, and you can't really tell where it's gonna go, because the whole time I was watching this, I felt like, is this going in her head? Is this like a hallucination she's having? Is it like she's hallucinating things because she's like has this like ridiculous rash that she's having? And it's just so hard. Like, even up till the end, I was still having that question. Like, the just from like the tint of the screen that they use and like the color palette that they use at the end, or even when certain moments are like the TV is talking to them or talking to her or something, like Dan Stevens is talking to him, whatever his name is, and you're just having this moment and you're like, is this just like she's talking to herself in her mind and she's pictured this, or is she like dreaming this up, or is it like a hallucination? And right up till the end, I still, like, up till right now we're recording, I still think that it's a hallucination that she's having.
It plays its cards very close to its chest, certainly with this one. You're never sure what exactly is going on with this one until we get to the end. And even at the end, you're still none the wiser of whether it is or it isn't hallucination. But I love Kate Micucci as an actress. I think she really embodies that sort of quirkiness, and I think it plays in really well to this character. I mean, the fact that they've uglied her up, so she has kind of a weird country mullet sort of thing going on, but she really embodies this sort of awkwardness. I mean, as you said already, she's into taxidermy. She has a husband who's more interested in watching poker and eating pigs in blankets than really having any sort of form of conversation. They're living in this sort of like in this weird 70s suburban hell. And you're right, she has these co-workers who don't resent her. I mean, they seem to like her, but at the same time she always feels that she's on the outsider because she's not perfect like these women that she works with, and this belief that this miracle cream is going to be the solution to all our problems because it's what our co-workers use, and they're all having these wonderful lives. And you see that scenes of her like trying to mimic their movements where they're like applying lotion, and you see her mimicking it on the side because she's so desperate to try and find what it is that's going to help her fit in. And as it progresses, and she seems to be having worse and worse allergic reaction to it, and her husband saying, just knock it off with the cream, but at the same time the TV's telling her that the itching is healing. It's going to be doing what it needs to do. It's all about, it's working for you. And by the end it just goes completely off the rails, really, doesn't it, into just completely gonzo territory.
The whole thing was really great, and I think that Kate Micucci really fits into that role. I think it's also because she has this a really unique voice,
yeah,
that also seems to match really well with what she's doing here. And the appearance, obviously, you mentioned, is really, really good. But I really, really liked that the story brought out her husband character, which, is played by Martin Starr. And he does a really great job in, that character is really well developed, where while he seems like he doesn't really care about much of anything, and he seems very like, whatever, rejecting everything around her, he also has this moment where he's very encouraging about her. Like, he's really like, no, you're perfect the way you are. And he keeps trying to reinforce that point over and over again. And that's something that I think is really nice, but you also have this feeling that, it really brings out this reality that sometimes it doesn't matter what your partner is telling you, but it's really, this sort of thing is really in your head when you feel like you need to fit in, and when you feel like, oh, you need to do something, or you need to be pretty, or, it's something that you need to get through on your own.
Yeah. I also appreciate the fact that this is slimy horror, and there seems to be a real lack of slimy horror. So the fact that we have scenes where, like, part of the big finale here is that she basically takes a bath in this cream, which seems to be taking on this otherworldly presence, kind of like the Blob, and I thought that the ending was going to be that it consumed her, but it's not to be the case. But in the end, we get some... It only adds on to the body horror element here, which is light, but it had a real sort of sliminess to it, which I kind of appreciated. I think modern horror is too dry. We need to get Cronenberg back on his... and obviously his son's doing body horror now as well, so we need to get the Cronenberg clan just like working overtime to make horror slimy again.
Yeah, no, because this one is like, it kind of like you don't really know what's going to happen all the way till the end.
No.
So till the end, you keep thinking that this is just a fantasy that she's living. Like, this rash is going to kill her, type of thing. And in the end, it kind of turns around where, she gets embodied by this thing, and, she can peel off this thing, and this new body shows up. It's like, what do you call it? A butterfly.
Yes, exactly.
And it was such a shocking type of twist, because when you do a show like that, usually you feel like, whenever you do horror, you always think that things are going to go worse than it is and not really go better, right?
Yeah, it's very rare that things work out, isn't it? So, but this one is sort of like, wow, it worked, but was this what we really wanted all along? And I think that's the real sort of question here.
See, and then that's the thing, is that's what I really love about the ending of this one, is that when you get to the end, she has these like close-up shots as she's laughing to the camera with all these women that she works with. And now she's gotten what she wants, but she's starting to see, I guess, in her face, you can see kind of like, oh, is this what I really want? And I think that was that was such a clever move to end like that. And it's really, really well put together. Like, The Outside is kind of one that the more you think about it, the better it is. Yes, definitely.
But no, this is, this was another sort of highlight to myself. I think it suffered again because of the length. I would have liked to see this one trimmed down, which I think is going to be a reoccurring theme throughout this series. But certainly I think that Annalie Amirpour really just directed the hell out of this one, and it was nice to see her doing something different again, because she's always had like a very surrealist edge to her work, whereas this one felt a little more grounded. It's obviously got the suburban setting rather than fantastical lands that we obviously saw in her first two films, so it's nice to see her doing something a little different. And I would definitely, I'm as always, I'm just excited to see what she does next. So but apparently she's working on a gender swap version of Cliffhanger, with her next film scheduled to be Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon, which is New Orleans set horror, which I'm excited about. I'm excited about her doing Cliffhanger, to be honest. So
on the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies, we talk TV, we talk...
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
Trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing.
Download the show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
So next up, we have Pickman's Model. This is directed by the same director as of the recent Firestarter remake, Keith Thomas. Another story based on a short story by H.P. Lovecraft. This one's most notable for starring Crispin Glover, who stars as the titular Pickman, who the art student Will Ferber becomes friends with, and kind of becomes obsessed with Pickman's work as it depicts various demons and gruesome scenes that cause this very mesmerizing effect on him. It's very sort of Stendhal syndrome-esque. And years later, Ferber re-encounters Pickman's work, finding himself suffering horrific dreams, and really determined this time to get to the bottom of what it is about Pickman's work that causes them to have this effect on people. I like this one, which is kind of weird for me to say because it's a period horror, and obviously for myself it's not one of my more preferred genres, but I think it was it was nice seeing Crispin Glover doing something creepy again, which is kind of his wheelhouse these days, as he was also in the remake of Wizard of Gore doing his creepy thing as well. So I think here he really embodies his character of Richard Pickman. And Ben Barnes is pretty damn good as well as our lead, Will Turber. But Kim, what did you think of Pickman's model?
Well, I mean, Pickman's model for me was one of the more complete stories. I felt like, there was like, obviously because it's probably because it's based on like Lovecraft, right? So it feels like it has like, it's not just like a snippet of something. It feels like there's like a complete beginning of something and then an end to something. Although I do think that it didn't really need to have that maybe last 5 minutes or something that it was there.
It definitely highlights again that problem with these episodes running like that extra 10 minutes too long. It's and I completely agree with this one. We have a great ending, and then it goes on for another 10 minutes, and it's like, great.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had this talk before about, the being parents part, and you don't really enjoy the child in peril type of thing. So when you go to the ending of this one, you have that kind of moment, and it's just kind of like, it's kind of a spoiler, I guess, but in the end, like, we already gave our spoiler alerts at the beginning of the episode. So basically, like, I'm not going to go further into it, but there's kind of that concept in there, and I wasn't a really big fan of that. I thought that it was really great if they ended at that moment where we had that big reveal of where, Pickman's inspirations come from.
Yes, exactly.
And I mean, I thought that would have been just like the perfect ending, because you already see where all of this like mesmerization is coming from, like, because it's not only Will that's getting affected by it, it is other, the other people at the gallery that sees it is also slightly affected by it. So, you already see that kind of like chain reaction to everything. So it didn't really need to have that last bit at all. I thought that everything was suffice for where it was,
Yeah, I think in many ways this reminded me of John Carpenter's cigarette burns from the first season of Masters of Horror. In that case, it was the film that sent you mad, and this time it's the paintings that send you mad. So I was unsurprised, really, as I think we've covered already, that Del Toro includes so many people who are associated with Lovecraft or Lovecraft shorts, or his own shorts, which are very Lovecraft-inspired. So in many ways, while it is obviously Del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, it is also Del Toro's love letter to Lovecraft. Which is, I know Lovecraft's a problematic author for some people, especially, but in terms of his work, I think it provides some very interesting source material to work from. And I think certainly with this one, it really built upon the original short story, which itself was more... It doesn't go into as much detail with the relationship between Turber and Pickman as we get here in the story, and instead it's sort of more a very sort of self-contained sort of short story of him going to Pickman's workshop and really sort of discovering they do a different twist on how the fact that monsters are real exists, but I think this one was kind of, it worked within the context of the story that was being told.
Yeah, I mean, I've never read the story, but based on what you're saying right now, I do think that the approach here is very more suitable for, like a short story style, like a short film style, where, you know, you have that relationship, so it kind of like enforces the characters itself and gives those two characters a lot more life than just, you know, hey, hello, I popped into your workshop and now I know what all this is about, you know. So it's, you know, obviously it's probably deeper than that, but I mean, like, with that, like, I think with shorts sometimes what we don't get is this deeper exploration of the characters. And I like that, you know, when you work with the short films like here, where you're kind of more in like this medium length short film type of thing, or even long. I don't even know how to say. Is it a long? Is it like a medium length short film? I don't know.
I'd say it's a short. You can classify it as a short film. I mean, it's around that 60-minute mark. I mean, you really got to go to the 80-minute mark minimum for it to be classed as a feature.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, everyone's going to have their own ideas of what a short film is. Most people think it's like around the 20-minute mark.
Yeah.
But I'd say anything like TV episode length is really a short film. And certainly in the presentation here. And I think certainly when you give the story a little more scope that obviously this episode has, I mean, if you're doing it in a visual format, you can have a little more flexibility. You can broaden things out. Whereas if you're writing it in a story, you're a little more restricted because you've got to essentially create this image in the reader's head, and at the same time not confuse it by having like cast of thousands in it and a bunch of minor characters that have nothing to do with the plot. So I think it's fun in this one, obviously, when you get to see the effect originally that Pickman's art has on Turbo, the fact he's sort of like, he's this real sort of hotshot art student and he encounters Pickman and then ends up kind of like a drunk and embarrassing himself in front of his fiance's family. And we find out that he sort of like, it takes all these years for him to sort of recover from this, and then he sort of encounters Pickman again and he sort of like finds himself like suffering the same things, only this time it's not just him, it's people around him that are also suffering. And I kind of got real hints of Event Horizon with this one.
Yeah, a bit,
of like,
yeah.
In that last 10 minutes and stuff, it all went kind of Event Horizon for me, which...
Yeah, it felt like, you know, it had this kind of like possession type of story to it a little, I guess. And, it turned very, very psychological as it went along. Like, it really dug deep into it. But then at the same time, I felt like, as the audience watching this, you kind of, your mystery is like, okay, well, what did he look at type of thing, right? Because there's always like this moment where he's looking at a picture, but no one really knows what the picture like is. For like, say when Pickman shows back up and he delivers a picture to his house, or to Thurber's house, and then you're just looking at it and he's looking at the picture and the kid looks at the picture, but we don't know what the picture is. And then, but he's like, oh, send it back, you know, type of thing. And you're like, oh, well, how is this going to affect the kid? You know, like, what's going to happen here? And that sort of thing, right? And I kind of like the little mystery behind it. It's kind of like, you know, what's in the suitcase. But I think that because some of the things really got the reveal later on, I don't know if it gave it more power or not. I don't know. I still think it's a very strong short, but as I think more about it, I sometimes feel like this one had certain flaws in maybe some execution. I'm not sure.
Cool. No, but yeah, I'd say it's definitely one of the stronger ones. It's definitely in that sort of middle range. It's not like up there with like Graveyard Rats or The Autopsy or even like Lot 36, but this is definitely a strong middle ground one. Much like our next selection, Dreams in a Witch House, which was another one that I'd seen done previously in Masters of Horror at that time by Stuart Gordon, and I can't say I was a huge fan of it, but Catherine Hardwicke's version is, wow, it's just phenomenal work she has done with this short story, based on another Lovecraft short story. If you haven't seen a theme, it's really shouting out about now. This one sees Rupert Grint returning from the Harry Potter world to team up with DJ Qualis and Ismael Cruz Corvoda. Here he plays Walter Grimman, who witnesses his twin sister Eppley's spirit being dragged away upon her death to the Forest of the Lost Souls, and spends the following years trying to figure out what happened to her, how to get back to this forest, and really investigating a number of spiritual claims while along the way trying to find a way to contact the other side, only to be dismayed that he constantly encounters frauds posing themselves as mediums. In doing so, he rents a room in the house of the executed witch Keziza Mason and takes a drug that's designed to take him to this forest, only to find that you shouldn't really be tampering in the spirit world. This one, as I said, it's a very stylish production. This one, as I say, is directed by Catherine Hardwicke, who did 13 as well as Twilight. She also did Red Riding Hood, which I didn't watch and keep meaning to get around to now that, we've had some time, because at the time it was caught up in that whole Twilight teen heart-throbbing horror nonsense. So, but the visual side of it really sort of stuck with me, so I'm probably going to get around to watching it at some point soon, and certainly more after watching this short, as she certainly really shows her chops as a director. I think this was really fantastic.
Well,
Kim did not, it seems.
No. I thought it was super stylish, and I think that if you're watching Red Riding Hood out of the style of the story, then that's a thumbs up on that one. But everything else in that is amazing. All right. So just get in ready for an average viewing experience. From what I remember, I watched it, I think, last year or something. I can't remember. But I can't really remember it right now. I remember little bits of it. I thought they had a really nice twist, I think. And that was about it. But yeah, no, Dreams in that Witch House was hands down my favorite in this entire cabinet of curiosities.
Oh wow.
I really love this one. I really like the mystical forest type of concept. I really like this different realm. It's really up my alley in that sense where, you have that kind of fantasy element, and then you also have this kind of like creepy element. And I have to say, I don't think I've seen Rupert Grint in anything else than Harry Potter. So
he was in Thunderpants.
Well, I haven't watched Thunderpants. I've never even heard of it.
It's about the kid with flammable farts.
Okay. Okay. So no,
there you go. Something to watch.
No, I haven't. So I haven't seen anything else by him, and I was kind of surprised and happy to see him do something like this, and really have, see a grown-up Ron Weasley, where he's much more, there's much more to his acting than that character. So it was a really nice surprise. I thought he did a really great job. And, obviously I haven't read any Lovecraft in my life, maybe like one that I can't remember right now. But I feel like I have. But at the same time, like, I think the story was so good in that sense where, like, the whole witch house itself had this wonderful character to it. At the same time as, just when he goes into move, and there's like so many things creeping in the corners, and I am a big fan of, like, I hate to say it, but I am a big fan of like stories which kind of like where the character screws you over in the end. Like, oh, you think you're out? No, you're not. I love things like that. And this story exactly had that at the end, and I really, really loved it. And I was really, like, it was great to see that, like the little, I don't know what it is. Is it the brother or the apprentice or the companion of the witch? I forgot.
So, yeah, it's a familiar.
It's like a man rat,
Yep.
So it's a man rat, and he's voiced by DJ Squalls, which I believe I only know him. I think, isn't he like part of Pirates of the Caribbean? The guy with the eye that kept rolling out? I don't know.
DJ Quads is probably best known for, he was the sort of gangly guy on Road Trip. But he's been in like Breaking Bad, Supernatural, Scrubs. He's one of those guys, if you see him, then you go, oh, it's him. He was... Yeah, in Road Trip, he's the nerdy kid who makes out with the black chick when they go to the fraternity.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the stuff. I've seen him in a few things as well. He was in Creep Show, the remake version, obviously. He's had a few little fun stuff there. He was I knew him from Z Nation. I watched a bit of that. I remembered his character from that as well.
He was the DJ, I believe, in that.
Yeah. And no. I mean, he's very, very fun. I really like his character and like the voice work because it's mostly voice work for this one, right? And the voice work for him is really, really fantastic. Like it's such a fun character. Also, like the lines and like I don't know. It's just such a weird thing to see a man rat running around, and you're just like, when it first shows up, you're like, what is that? You know, like there's so much creativity in this, and I don't know how true it is to the short story itself, what changes it has. I'm not sure if you read it before.
I've read it a long time ago. This one's actually very sort of true in the fact that it keeps it in that sort of like 16th century setting. Sorry, not 16th century. I mean, keeps it in a similar sort of setting to it. I mean, it cuts out some of the Lovecraftian things, such as like the elder things and bits and pieces, but it generally keeps all the main sort of players here, as you said, like the man rat Jenkins Brown, who also serves as the narrator of this story, which I thought was kind of fun. And he has a lot more of a Cockney rascal sort of accent to him, which is why it threw me off. I didn't think it was DJ Khaled's voice. So kudos to him. And I think this is a great thing about Rupert Grint here. He's not just doing the Ron Weasley thing. He's trying to branch out and being like who's played Harry Potter? I'm going to mind blank. Daniel Radcliffe. Yeah. He's doing that Daniel Radcliffe, Elijah Wood thing of just like picking a weird project to be involved in. I would love to see him do more weird projects. I think he could be really find his niche. And the whole time I'm not looking at him and going, oh, that's just like grown up Ron Weasley. I'm seeing it's sort of like, here he is playing this character.
Yes.
And there's so many bits in the start of this episode that just really sort of resonated with me, such as like when they're doing the fake seance and the production of ectoplasm and stuff. Yeah. All that sort of side of thing I'm just like such a huge fan of since I saw the Darren Brown special seance where he talked about these old like spiritual sort of sideshow techniques that they used to run and things. So I really did enjoy this one. So I'm excited to see what he does next, especially as he, puts more and more distance between himself and Harry Potter. And he's in Knock at the Cabin, which is the new M. Night Shyamalan movie, which actually doesn't look too bad.
Okay, I haven't heard of it. I'm not like too super on track with the recent stuff, so. The last I know is The Visit. And that was a while back, I think.
Yeah, basically he's vacationing at a cabin with his family, and they're taken hostage by these 4 strangers who demand they make the ultimate sacrifice to avert the apocalypse. And Dave Bautista is one of those strangers.
Oh, okay.
Which will either be exciting to you, or you go, that does nothing for me whatsoever. So, yeah. Anything else you want to talk about? Witch House?
No, I don't really.
Cool. Next up, we had Panos Cosmatos. I've taken the correct that. It's Panos Cosmatos.
Cosmatos, maybe?
Cosmatos.
Cosmatos?
I think you're more on track than I am with this one.
Uh-huh.
He is the director of Beyond the Black Rainbow and Mandy. And his episode, The Viewing, is probably the most trippy one. It's another modern day setting one. This is one that he also wrote himself, along with Aaron Stewart Ann. This one also is noteworthy for starring Charlene Yee, who I'm a big fan of. It also has Eric Andre and Peter Weller, as well as Sophia Boutella. Here, the wealthy recluse Lionel Lassiter invites a bunch of people to his mansion to take part in a special viewing. At the same time, he gives them drugs, he lets them listen to trippy music, and introduces them to his meteorite that he keeps in the center of his apartment. And in doing so, the gathering of these people causes the meteorite to crack open, and an oozing entity emerges. Surreal madness ensues, I think, is really the best way to go from there.
Yes.
I dug the hell out of this one. I'm a fan of his work. I certainly liked Mandy, even though I felt that in watching Mandy, it could have let the film breathe rather than just being this onslaught of craziness. But I think it was certainly one of the more interesting films that Nicolas Cage did in that wilderness period, that also gave us the likes of Joe and Pig and Willy's Wonderland. And certainly, if you were a fan of his films, then I think you'll like the viewing as well, because it's very much in the same sort of style. It's a very sort of surrealistic piece that just constantly finds ways to mess with your mind while introducing odd and weird characters, as is certainly the case with Lionel Luster, this wealthy recluse who's designed his whole home to fit in with its surroundings, and he's commissioned someone to create music that complements the architecture, and there's all these weird ideas that it throws at them, but at the same time it has characters acknowledge that things are weird rather than just going along with it and making us question what exactly is supposed to be happening as the audience. But yeah, I like this one. Kim, what did you think of it though?
Well, the viewing is very unique. I mean, there's a whole psychedelic element to it that I think is pretty cool. It's very weird and yet very mesmerizing. You can't really take your eyes away from it at some point, because you're just watching this and you're just like, what is going on? You just have a bunch of people getting high and drinking things, and it's kind of like you're sitting around in a circle and you're with a bunch of random strangers and they're peer pressuring you to do something. And then all of a sudden, you'll finish being peer pressured, and then they'll be like, yeah, let's go to a room and close all the doors and see this thing that I've never shown anyone before, And you feel very you can imagine the people here who feel like, oh, well, I'm so specially chosen to come see this, special thing. And then you go into this room and this thing just looks so weird, and right away you have this angle of it where you already feel like it's not from this world. It has this kind of statue but kind of alive type of feeling to it. I watched a horror short recently that was similar to that. It was called Tisselboo. It's from Netherlands, I think. And it has this similar concept of having this thing that embodies nature in a certain way. And it's like this giant weird mushroom or something. But yeah, and this one reminded me a lot of it when you saw that creature, but then all of a sudden things go crazy when what was it that they did? And then they broke the it was they did something to it. Oh, they blew the smoke at it or something, right?
Eric Andre's character blows pot smoke into it, which awakens it. Yeah. Apparently this was the secret all the while. It just needed to get stoned to emerge from a stone. I did like Eric Andre's character because he does really cool sort of bullshit on a lot of things. Yeah. And it's always great when you have a character who takes a moment to call people on their bullshit. It's sort of it's like, thanks, this has been real great, and it's been great doing your space cocaine, and yeah, I think it's between him and Charlene Yu that's really sort of to myself, and the character who I didn't sort of resonate with, just still felt very sort of fit perfectly within this world, because they're either part of Luster's sort of weird cult home that he's running, where everyone's sort of tuned in and tuned out, or they're just angry, which is also a really great way to counter tripped out. And then if that doesn't hold your attention, people's heads explode and melt. So
yeah,
it's sort of like
things get wild. And then I really loved it that, usually it kind of like, we have this, there's this like kind of, understanding, or whenever we talk about like when horror movies make fun of horror tropes, it's always about, how colored people are the people who end up dying first. And in this one, they're the first ones who are like, yeah, let's just go. This is not right. Let's exit, and then just see them stumbling away. And I just find it so funny. The whole process, like, it's very weird because in one way you think there's this like whole horror element to it. And at the same time, like when you're watching it, the horror kind of falls away by the end, and you're kind of like, this is so weird and yet so entertaining. And that was like how I felt about it. Like, I don't know if I like it or I would go back to watch it again, because it is very, very bizarre. But I think this was a very interesting experience to have as a viewing experience, and surprisingly it's called The Viewing, so
Indeed. It certainly has an interesting monster here, and I think this is the great thing. It's sort of like, if you're not buying into the tripped up stuff, here, have some gore. There we go. We'll win you over one way or another with this one. And I think it's, as I said, it's not since Raiders of the Lost Ark we've seen a good face melting, so
yeah,
gotta give it that.
yes.
But it's still like so hard to not look at that scene and go, oh, this is just Raiders of the Lost Ark again. But it ends on kind of a ominous ending. But I don't think we're ever going to see a sequel to this. It's just another Panos' weird trips. He's decided to let us in on his world for a little bit. So, but I'm glad he's obviously had this platform for more people just to check out his work, who may have obviously missed Beyond the Black Rainbow and Mandy along the way. And I think if you like this one, then I would give Mandy a watch. I think that's probably the better of the two films that he's made already. He's currently got a bunch of projects in the works at the moment.
Yeah. But I mean, you make a really good point. I think that in general, like, obviously we're not at the end of this yet. We have one more episode to go. But I think that that's a really good point that you make, that in terms of any of these directors here, they all, like, it really makes you kind of like think about what, like further viewing, like going deeper into the directors that really pique your interest, and going deeper into the stuff that they've already done. And I think that's what's really great about anthologies in general. They have that effect. But yeah, I mean, the next one is The Murmuring.
Oh, yes.
and it's directed by Jennifer Kent, which, most of us know did Babadook, which at least that's the one that I saw. Yep. And she happens to use the same actress from Babadook, Essie Davis, as the main character.
Yep.
Yeah.
This did nothing for me, I'm going to say right off the bat. This is based on a short story by Del Toro, with teleplay by Jennifer Kent herself. This one follows Nancy and Edgar Bradley, husband and wife ornithologists, here as you said, played by Essie Davis and Andrew Lincoln. They are studying bird murmurations, which is basically the patterns which birds fly in. And having recently lost their daughter Ava, they're struggling to deal with their grief and sort of burying their way in their work, and decide to go away to a remote country home to further continue their studies. At the same time, Nancy starts seeing ghostly apparitions of a crying boy and a screaming angry woman, and at the same time her husband sort of like dismisses them and believes that it's just her struggling to deal with the loss of their daughter. This one's very nicely shot, but at the same time did very little for me. And I think it's because it's a ghost story, and I have a very hard time getting on with ghost stories, especially subtle ones. While there are obviously ghost stories I do enjoy, things such like, House on Haunted Hill, for example. where it's more so, and sorry, Devil's Backbone in terms of Del Toro's work, I really enjoyed as well. But with this one, it was just much too subtle for me and did not hold my interest at all. So it was a fail for myself. But Kim,
what to say? The Murmuring is very slow pace. I kind of felt it was very Jennifer Kent because that was how I felt about the Babadook also. I'm not one of the people who have like extreme love for Babadook. I think it's a great movie, but it's like I really love the monster in it. The whole concept of bedtime stories and stuff like that coming to life. But I thought it was really, really, really like there were some really creepy moments and stuff like that. The thing with the Murmuring is that it's very slow, and like you said, it's very subtle. There are some horror, like the ghostly elements are very predictable, and they're repeated constantly. So it feels a bit repetitive, that it kind of loses that effect. But I do like one thing about it is that the ending itself was really nice. I think that very rare, and that's one of the things I really appreciate from Del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. It's not about stories that always end on a bad note, which is what most horror movies are, you know, like something ends and you're like, oh no, it's not the end, you know. But this one is really like for a few of the stories there is a decent resolution to them, and the Murmuring has that type of effect where you usually have this ghost story that you're trying to resolve and figure out what's wrong. And it always turns into this, you know, I'm not saying this isn't like a tragic story. It is a very sad story as well. But like once the stories behind the crying boy and the screaming angry woman comes to light, right? But I really like the ending in the sense that when, you know, she figures out what they need in order to kind of pass on. And I think that that's a really nice touch to the story. But as a story as a whole, I thought it was more of like a family drama. It was like there was constantly the husband and wife just complaining to each other. And one doesn't want the affection because she's not ready. And then the other one's like, why don't you want me? You know, type of thing. And then you're like, it's a very like, it's like a very like wishy-washy love story between a couple. While, you know, I can understand where that's all coming from, but in the space of, you know, watching a million birds fly around and, you know, fly in patterns, and then you have like all this stuff, the horror elements are very little. Like it is a miss for me. Like I thought this one was a bit other than the ending and some of the few, like the first time those scares hit, it didn't really do too much for me either. I thought it was a bit too dramatic. The mystery and horror kind of got lost in all the drama. So I'm not a huge fan. It wasn't a great way to end the Cabinet of Curiosities. It kind of felt a little bit like, after all of the stuff we went through before, like all 7 episodes of things that we had gone through, all the excitement, the weirdness, the psychedelic, the, you know, this was a really weird way to end it.
Definitely so. It's weird the fact that I'm watching this and I'm just sitting there going, you know what, I'd rather just rewatch Antichrist again, which is probably the more extreme way of telling this story. Again, obviously dealing with the loss of a child and a couple struggling to deal with it, and involuntary as well, that leads to violence on a number of levels and twisted imagery. But I still find it a lot more enjoyable than the plodding around that this plot does. I mean, yes, it's very well shot and it has moments where it catches your interest, but just ultimately I just failed to connect on this one in just any sort of level, really. It just did not engage me in the way that many of the others, even like the lesser episodes of this series, I still find myself sort of going, you know, I'd rather watch something. Try and find an example now. Say like rather watch like Pickman's Model again than The Murmuring. And even though I understand that Pittman's model has its issues, it's still one I would see myself returning to a lot more sooner than the memorying. So I think even the viewing, but then again, it's hard to compare the memorying and the viewing, because the viewing's such a onslaught on the senses, and this one's more it's trying to play mind games, but it's just not. It just never builds up the right sort of tension, really. So yeah, it didn't, as I said, it just did not work for myself. But ultimately, I mean, would you say you want to see a second series of Cabinet Curiosities?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that the directors that he chose were really good choices. They all have it's kind of like when we did the female director season, where, you know, everyone has work, like notable work that not everybody has seen, but at the same time not enough work for it to be like, okay, they're like super known either. So it's really, really nice to see them, you know, being able to do an expose on a bunch of directors and giving them that platform to kind of show their skills, show their abilities. And I mean, even though, you know, we were complaining about the murmuring being not too good, I still think that there is some stylistic elements to it that, you know, shows off, you know, for some people. I know that, you know, if you look at like some of the reviews of the murmuring, there are a lot of people who really like it. So, you know, we're not, you know, we're definitely not the, you know, we're not the be all end all of it. But you know, like, obviously we don't, like, even for me, I like ghost stories, so that's why probably I found a little bit more value to it than you did. Cause that's my boathouse. I really, really like it. But yeah, that's, but I think that, you know, it's a really great thing. I mean, how about you? Do you want to see a second season?
I would like to see a second season, certainly, and I agree with yourself in the fact that Del Toro here has provided a really great platform for a lot of these directors to become noticed. I mean, obviously, people like Vincenzo Natali. I mean, there's people out there who know him for his films like Cube and Splice, and then there's other people who recognize his work that he's done directing episodes of things like Breaking Bad. And at the same time, I'm always happy to see Anna Lily Amirpour just putting out more work. I love her work, like, through and through. I was a huge fan of Go Walk Some Alone at Night. I was one of the few people who liked Bad Batch. So for her to have another platform here, I was just all for it. And at the same time, it also brings in a lot of, like, really interesting character actors into this. I mean, people like Crispin Glover and I'd say Rupert Grint, that it gives them a chance to, like, do something different, a chance for them to expand the repertoire, or really get themselves sort of, like, re-noticed and be like, oh, I remember you. But there's certain, I mean, it's hard to, like, say, like, when they come to season 2, you'd like to see less Lovecraft, because Lovecraft is so infused in Del Toro as well, much like Stuart Gordon's. There's certain authors that directors become obsessed with, and certainly for those two, Lovecraft has constantly appeared or been referenced throughout their work, and there's certainly directors that I would like to see turn up in the second season. Maybe like Julia Ducournau, who did Raw and Titan E. Maybe like the Soska sisters would be really fun to do an episode. So there's definitely directs out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of, like, there's an abundance of people that could really do well in this. But I think, you know, Del Toro really chooses people who he feels would really reflect a Lovecraftian type of story really well, because, you know, that's what he really, really likes. So I'm pretty sure the next season will be, if he has a next season, it will be the same type of thing. Yeah. For sure. You know, because that's what he, you know, that's what he enjoys, right?
I really love his openings as well. he has got one of those great accents, much like a Herzog.
Yeah.
Where you just like, anytime he's just like narrating or talking about something, it's just wonderful to hear him talk about this, and you feel this sort of like genuine enthusiasm he has for these curiosities, and it's sort of like, as we said towards the start of this episode, you know that he's probably got a cabinet of curiosities himself. He just like wheels it out and freaks people out at dinner parties with it by producing odd items from it, and even like how he was like when we have his episode The Outside. Yes, it was The Outside, where he's talking about the remote being this magic wand and late night TV viewing. The way he's presenting it is exactly the same as he presents one of the more gothic or period pieces here, and I think it's just every time he like turned up to provide the introduction, it just like perfectly set up the theme of that episode. So, and the fact he also says who the director is, he's sort of like determined. He's sort of like, this is who directed this. Go check him out.
Yeah, it's a really nice thing. Like, I think that the idea that he comes out and introduces the piece and stuff, it's a really, really nice touch to this whole season. Yeah, I really think it's worth it to do a second one, and I don't see any reason for them to not greenlight a second one for him. Seeing David Fincher's gotten 3 seasons of Love, Death, Robots at this point.
They can just keep producing Love, Death, and Robots to myself. It's every time we get to the end of a Love, Death, and Robots season, it's sort of like, when's the next one coming? And I think the thing with Love, Death, and Robots, it's got I think the reason I'm more looking forward to another season of that than Cabinet of Curiosities is just because it covers a wider range of stories, rather than this one itself very sort of like set in the sort of stories it was going to tell throughout the course of the season. And I think it was the fact that it was so stacked with like period pieces that also sort of like didn't resonate with me as much as if they'd like mixed it up more and put some more modern stories in there, such as like more like The Autopsy and Lot
36.
Lot 36. And I think that's the thing when you look at Love, Death, and Robots, it's such a range of stories and styles and things. It's constantly keeping you engaged. It's not just a bunch of the same things, which at times it felt that this was very sort of set in its particular periods that it wanted to. And I think that, again, that's just because you're using a lot of Lovecraft work, and obviously it's got a time and setting to it. But maybe this just inspires you to go off and check out a bunch of Lovecraft stuff. You can pick it up real cheap on the Kindle.
That's not, well, it's definitely something. I just never remember that I want to read Lovecraft.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff in there, to say the least. When I was working in Borders, I had one of my underlings. He was a real Lovecraftian fan and used to constantly recommend it. So that's how I stumbled into Lovecraft. So, but yeah, so I would say it's a recommend from us both of them.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's episode. Thank you as always for listening. If you haven't done already, please do hit the like and subscribe button wherever you happen to be listening to us. Leave us a review. Let us know what you think of the show. You can check out our blog, which is moviesandteapodcast.wordpress.com. And you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter as well, so come say hi to us there. Let us know what your favourite stories of this collection was and who you would like to see heading up stories in Season 2. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thanks to my co-host Kim, and we'll be back very soon with another selection. But until then, good night.